Good morning. I'm Marianne Honeycutt. I'm the Dean for Social Behavioral Sciences and the Library, and I'm here today to welcome you to today's Constitution Day presentation. This year, the Constitution Day Committee decided to explore an examination of wrongful convictions and exonerations. As Eric Blackmon shares his story, I hope you discover ways in which the human aspects of his case interact with the Constitution. Not only do we want to right existing wrongs through restorative practice, but also speak to preventing future wrongs.
So one of our goals for this event today is the idea that greater awareness can lead to a call to action and to hopefully lead to some prevention of wrongful convictions. The Innocence Project estimates that 4% of all capital convictions are wrongful convictions, and that they document 285 people who've been wrongfully convicted with the possibility of a death sentence. And we can also examine the role of race in our criminal justice system, including in policing, in the courts, in convictions, and sentencing, in wrongful convictions, and exonerations, in helping the wrongfully convicted in the newly exonerated reintegrate back into society. African Americans are, according to the Innocence Project, African Americans are 7 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of murder than whites, 7 times. African Americans also make up 62% of all people exonerated by DNA testing alone, and 50% of all exonerated people. So they may be exonerated by other means, not just DNA testing, but eyewitness testimony and other factors. So we got to wonder, what's driving, what are the factors kind of leading to these wrongful convictions? Is it simply a case of mistaken identity? Is it prosecutorial misconduct, racial bias, a drive to get those arrests, close those cases, and get those convictions? And I think understanding this really requires looking at the whole criminal justice system. And a lot of my students are here today, and what I've told them in class when thinking about Eric Blackmon's case is that at the time of his conviction, he was roughly the age of many of you here in the room. So imagine at your age, you are wrongfully accused and wrongfully convicted of a murder that you did not commit. And then the time that he spent trying to gain his exoneration was roughly the entire extent of your lifetime. So your whole life, that many years over, almost, right? Trying to get yourself out of something and finding yourself in prison and all the ripple effects of that for your families. And then that challenge of reintegrating back into society after being away for so long. Right, this is trying to provide, I think, a proper framing, how we connect this in part maybe to our own experiences in our own lives. And I think we can think about not just the injustices that Mr. Blackmon has faced, and I need to admit that I as much as I've thought about it, I doubt that I fully appreciate the breadth and the depth of the injustices that he's faced, that he's had to endure, but also the ripple effects of wrongful convictions, right? Not just on the wrongfully convicted, but on their families, as they are losing a sibling, a parent, a lover, a breadwinner, and the struggles to sort of maintain ties and contacts over the years while someone is incarcerated. Just the phone bills alone of collect calls from prison to the home, right? There's a variety of these ripple effects that don't only affect the individual person. And these go on not just for years, but for decades. And even kind of extending those ripples out. I'm the family member of a murder victim, and it happened in my teens when I was in high school. And thinking of not just the trauma of the event, of the trial, of the years of going to parole hearings and try to keep the person incarcerated. That person was rightfully convicted. Occupied a good 3 decades of my family's life. Easily the most significant event in my lifetime, shaping me into the person I am today. And so to imagine that 10, 20 years later, you find out that the person that was convicted was the wrong person. that now that the person who actually committed the crime has never been held accountable for what that person did, and instead someone else has been needlessly suffering, would be devastating for the victim's family. And so I think the importance of understanding and addressing these issues of wrongful convictions it's in everyone's interest, right? Both in the interest of clearly the person who's been wrongfully convicted, but in all of us, right? If you have an interest in justice, there's the justice for the person wrongfully convicted, the justice for the person who's the victim of a crime, right? That no one is winning in this. It's a lose-lose situation for everyone. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Professor Karen Daniel.
Well, good morning, everyone. I want to thank you all for being here. I really want to thank the members of the Constitution Day Committee for putting together this program and for being so kind and helpful in organizing it and in all of our interactions. And I thought that was a lovely lead-in to this program, that kind of background and getting you thinking about what it might be like to be wrongfully convicted. So to give you a little bit more about who I am, I'm a law professor. I actually just recently went on emerita status at Northwestern Law School, but I've been teaching there in the legal clinic for 19 years in the Center on Wrongful Convictions. And so my job for the last 19 years has been to work with law students, second and third year law students, representing people like Eric Blackmon, who were convicted of crimes that they didn't commit. And most of them, when we first meet them, are still in prison. And if things go well, we're able to get them out of prison. But of course, that doesn't undo all the harm to their lives and the lives of so many others. And I've helped over 20 people get out of prison, and our project as a whole has helped over 50 people in that period of time. So we're really proud of our work. So I'm happy to represent Northwestern today. So I'd like to get a sense of you all, who I'm talking to. I know many of you are students here at the college. So I'd like a show of hands if you see somewhere in your future career being involved in the legal system in some capacity. Okay, great. Seems like about 50, 60%. And so let's break that down a little bit. How many of you see your path possibly going toward law enforcement in some way? Okay, excellent. That's great. These are the people we want to speak to. How about corrections? So corrections officers, parole officers, probation officers. Okay, very good. And then how about more on the litigation side, future lawyers, paralegals, legal assistants, that sort of thing? Okay, because it takes a village, takes a team to succeed in the law. And lastly, how many of you all are registered to vote? Okay, I want to see everybody that thank you. And if you're eligible to vote, I hope you register to vote, because if you're registered to vote, then you get to vote on candidates who are going to make the laws that govern criminal cases and other aspects of the legal system. You're going to vote for the judges who are going to determine the guilt or innocence of people like my friend Eric. You're going to be called to serve on juries so that you can personally have a say in what happens in our legal system. So that's all really important. Now, my job is just to set this table for Eric's presentation, which is the main reason that you're here. And I've tasked myself with doing two things. One is to give you an introduction to the crime of which he was wrongfully convicted. And second is to give you just a sense of the legal landscape in which Eric was operating when he worked his way out of his wrongful conviction. So just a little bit of the procedure that governs criminal cases, and especially people's cases after they've been convicted. So I'll try to do my best not to bore you, but I'm not going to promise that you won't be confused, especially by the procedural background, because it is confusing. And so I'm going to challenge you as you're listening to my presentation and to Eric's as well, is to think about a few different things. One, would you be able to do what Eric did? to what role does the Constitution play in all of this? And I'll point it out a couple of times. And 3, and I think this is the most important, is where do you see problems and cracks in the system? What would you do perhaps to change a procedure here or there to make things easier or harder for people to do what they need to do? How would you impact the system? Because you are going to have the opportunity to do that, or to vote for candidates who will have the opportunity to do that. So be thinking about it, be actively thinking about it as I'm going through my spiel. This picture of me and Eric, by the way, was taken in January of this year. This was the very day that Eric was exonerated, finally, of the murder case. It was the day on which all the charges against him were dropped. So I like to have that up there. I don't have a PowerPoint about the crime of which he was convicted, but that's where I'm going to start. So we go back to July 4th, 2002, at about 4:30 in the afternoon on the 1100 block of South Pulaski on the west side of Chicago, 4:30 p.m., broad daylight. The murder victim was a man by the name of Tony Cox. He was standing on the sidewalk outside of a restaurant talking to one or more people. When 2 men with guns came up and gunned him down, and he died from gunshot wounds on the scene. The men were there for a short time, and they ran off. The man Tony Cox was speaking with, his name was Victor Arrigo. Tony Cox was a middle-aged African-American man. Arrigo was an older white man who later police learned was literally a member of the mafia. And was talking to Tony Cox right beforehand. And police suspected him, I think rightfully, of being involved. So he was really of no help to the investigation. I didn't see anything. I don't know who did it. And he was investigated himself as possibly being involved. So at the time of the shooting, 2 motorists happened to be driving by, 2 women who were driving by in cars in opposite directions. Between them, they had 5 kids in their respective cars, so they're driving their kids, they're inside their cars. I mean, think about this. They're some distance away from the shooting, and they happen to see some or all of the shots being fired. The most that either woman saw the gunman was 5 seconds from inside their car, from at least several buildings away, and maybe more depending on who you believe. They both called 911. One of them kept driving. The other one actually stopped to assist the victim, which was kind of her. Then they continue with their life, and they are not called. Well, one of them looked at some photos that night, and she didn't make a definitive identification. After that, it was almost 2 months before these 2 women were called back to the police station to look at photographs that included Eric Blackmon. So please do this thought experiment after this session. Go walk out on your campus, take a look at someone you've never seen before for 5 seconds, and then write yourself a note on your phone 2 months from now to think back to that moment and ask yourself, would I be able to recognize this person again 2 months later after looking at them for 5 seconds? Just think about that. You can come to your own conclusion. But anyway, the police learned that Tony Cox was a member of a gang, that Victor Arrigo was not only a member of the mafia, but he was also friends with the head of Tony Cox's gang. They investigated that avenue. They got the names of some suspects. One of the suspects' name was Eric Pride. Pride was the nickname. That is not, by the way, Eric Blackmon. That was not his nickname. This was a different Eric. That was a suspect name they got right at the very beginning. Somehow, mysteriously, between the first few days after the crime and when the witnesses look at photos that include Eric Blackmon, the police mysteriously decide that Eric is a suspect. The witnesses supposedly, there's question about that, identified Eric's photo and supposedly identified him in a lineup. Eric's arrested. He immediately tells the police and his own lawyer on the day of his arrest that he had, thank goodness, again, it was a holiday, that he had been at a 4th of July barbecue that day, that lots of people could vouch for him. The police did not speak to any of those people. Eric was arrested immediately and charged with murder, and this was in September of 2002, and he didn't see the light of day until January of this year. He was not a member of any gang, and particularly Tony Cox's gang. He had no connection with Tony Cox or Victor Arrigo. He had no connection with that neighborhood, didn't live there, didn't hang out there. No motive, no gun, no DNA evidence, no fingerprints, nothing. Just the two eyewitness identifications. And based on that evidence, in this country, in this state, someone can be sentenced to prison for 60 years, which would have been a life sentence for him because he would have had to do the whole 60 years. So that's the background of the case. In the introduction, it was pointed out that Eric was approximately your guys' age when he was arrested. He's an impressive, still young man, but very impressive now in his suit and in this photo. This is what Eric looks like when he was arrested. And it breaks my heart. So that's the crime. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about, and I know you're going to know some of this, but you're probably not going to know all of it, a little bit about criminal process in Illinois in state court. So the police are first tasked with investigating the crime. They usually do that independently of input from the prosecutors. They make the initial arrest. Then together, the police have to get together with the prosecutors to approve charges. In this case, murder charges against Eric, as I said, based on the identifications. Then to initiate proceedings in court, the prosecutors have to go make some presentation to either the grand jury, which results in an indictment, or to a judge at a proceeding called a preliminary hearing to satisfy the requirement that there be probable cause to proceed, to move forward in court. If the case proceeds and if the person doesn't plead guilty, which obviously Eric did not because he was innocent, the defendant has a choice of their guilt or innocence being determined by a judge, which is called a bench trial, and that's what Eric had, or a jury trial where you have a panel of 12 citizens deciding your guilt. And I say guilt or innocence, but really it's your guilt or lack of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. From the time that criminal proceedings are initiated, through trial, through, you have one appeal, that's your right to have, your legal right to have. You have a right to counsel being provided for you if you can't afford your own counsel. The direct appeal, this one appeal as of right, is just to look at the trial and see if there are any visible errors. After this process, by and large, the criminal justice system feels like it's done its job. We've given you a lawyer, you had a trial, you had one appeal. Good. And if you're still convicted, and if you're still saying that you're not guilty or that you were wrongfully convicted or that something went wrong in the process, good luck, you're on your own. So this is kind of the basic stuff. This is what we as a society feels protects the rights of the innocent as well as the rights of victims and the rights of society. So at that point, that's when Eric has to start working on his own. Illinois has a pretty good, considering other states, post-conviction remedy. And what that means is that after you've been convicted, after you've lost your appeal, if you're still in prison and you still think that your conviction is invalid or you're innocent, you can file what's called a post-conviction remedy. And you can raise in it that your constitutional rights were violated or that you're innocent. The trick is you have to do it based on new evidence that wasn't presented previously and that couldn't have been presented previously, which is tricky because what does that mean? But that's for the courts to decide. So you need new evidence. You have to file it pretty quickly after the end of your appeal, within 6 months. By the way, there are exceptions to everything. These are kind of the basic rules. But there are exceptions to everything. But the farther you get in the system and the more you're trying to take advantage of exceptions, the harder it gets. When you file your petition, now, mind you, you're a prisoner now. You're in prison. You've probably spent all the money you have on the lawyer who represented you at trial unsuccessfully. If you had any money left over, you spent it on your appeal. So you're in prison. You have no money. You have limited access to the law library, limited access to talking to people on the outside. Now you've got 6 months to file your petition to put all your innocence, you have to investigate it, and put all your innocence and all your constitutional violates in a petition without the help of a lawyer. You can ask for a lawyer, but first you have to file your petition and put all your evidence in there. So if you're not successful there, you can have another appeal. And I just think this is perverse, but at least in Illinois, you have a right to a lawyer for that appeal. But if you haven't put all the good stuff in your petition, it's really too late for a lawyer to help you. So you have that appeal, and you're only supposed to file one of these. Again, there are exceptions, but that's your path in Illinois. So there's one other remedy that I want to talk about. It's in federal court. It's where Eric eventually prevailed. It's the right of habeas corpus. It's actually mentioned in the United States Constitution. It's a very old right. It goes back, I'm not a really legal scholar, but at least back as far as the 1300s. It became applicable to state court prisoners like Eric around the time of the Civil War. But President Bill Clinton, I'll never forgive him for this, in 1996 signed a bill that was passed by Congress called the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act. It's known as EDPA. This was in the wake of some pretty horrific terrorist acts like the World Trade Center bombing in 1993, Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. So this bill was passed, and it did many things, but it really restricted the right of habeas corpus for federal prisoners. And so basically what that allows a state prisoner to do is to file a petition in federal court alleging that he or she is in prison in violation of the United States Constitution. You get a year to file after your appeal is done, again with exceptions. You have to first make sure you properly raise the issue in state court. And what the EDPA did that I mentioned is that it changed the rules so that there is just incredible deference to the state court. So if the state court has rejected your claim, it's going to be really hard for you to convince the federal court that they should accept your claim, because for the most part, they defer to the state court. In fact, there's a whole lot of law that says if the state court is wrong, that's not enough for you to get relief. The state court had to have been unreasonable. And by the way, what are some constitutional violations? Things like the prosecutors didn't turn over evidence that could have helped you, you had a terrible lawyer, you weren't allowed to put on your defense, things like that. So really very fundamental errors in the process, but very hard to get the federal court to pay attention and give you relief. You're usually only allowed one petition. And the relief that you get if you're successful is that the federal court only has limited jurisdiction over states, but what it can do is it can say to the state of Illinois, you either have to give Eric Blackmon a fair trial or you got to let him out of prison. That's basically what the right of habeas corpus does. So it's pretty powerful if you're successful. So that's kind of the backdrop to what Eric Blackmon, who was not a lawyer and was not at that time a paralegal, had to figure out from inside his maximum security prison cell so that he could be released and be before you today. And if you have questions about any of this crazy stuff, you can ask me later. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks. Hey everyone, thank you for allowing me to be here, taking your time out your day to listen to me, and basically just give you a version of what happened to me in my words. I like to call it 7 seconds. 7 seconds. I want you all to really think about it. 7 seconds. My life boiled down to nothing more than 7 seconds. What could you do in 7 seconds? Probably could tie your shoe. Probably couldn't even use the bathroom in 7 seconds. For me, 7 seconds was all that it took for a judge to say that I was guilty. One woman drove down the street and said she seen the guy face for 2 to 3 seconds. Another woman said maybe 4 to 5. 7 seconds. Wow. For 16 years, 7 seconds would ultimately go through my mind 1,000,000 times. Sometimes I would sit in that cell and just stare. We had a little small wristwatch that we hung on the wall to tell time. And I would just look at 7 seconds tick by so many times. Wow, I don't know what to tell you. But I'll tell you how it all started for me. As she described the murder that happened on July the 4th, 2002, which I was not aware of. To me, July the 4th was a great day. Myself and a few friends, we were throwing a barbecue. We're gonna have a great time. We invited a bunch of people over. We threw it on a little spot that we normally hung out in. They had a nice grassy little play lot that we all hung out and just, partied sometimes or did most things that most of you guys would do. So that day, we got food. I had a car. We played music out of it, the big speakers. Barbecue, we played cards, played chess. I'm oblivious to Mr. Tony Cox being killed. Why, how, who done it. I had nothing to do with it. Never knew him. Never had any chance meeting. Our paths never crossed. Wow. It's just what happens. Fast forward 2 months later, I was going to court for a little mere citation, something that you normally get in the neighborhood for just being out. You could do that or they'll give you a ticket or something like that. It was nothing major. I'd never really been in any big trouble. Never did anything wrong. That day I walked into the courtroom to find several police officers there asking me my name. Hey, you Eric Blackmon? Yeah, of course. Before long, I found myself in handcuffs being led over to the what they call the Violent Crimes Unit of Area 4 Police Department. Why? Me? This must be some type of mistake is what I thought. Of course, I've never done anything wrong. So what they did was they placed me in a small room for hours. They just sit you there. Nobody ever told me while I was there at that point. Never heard anything, never knew anything, nothing. Eventually some officers come in. Hey, how are you? Not so great. I'm sitting in the police station. So, we talk. They eventually ask me, what's my name, where I'm from, address, those type of things, just regular formal questions. It's nothing major. It's nothing to be worried about yet. Just knowing this must be some type of mistake. Someone must have got this wrong. Must have the wrong person, because I certainly haven't done anything wrong. Eventually, they go on to tell me why I'm there. So where were you this day, July the 4th, 2002, at approximately 4, 5 that evening? I tell the officers, I was throwing a barbecue with all of my friends. What block I was on, where I was, what I was doing. Hey, tell them you could go ask anyone. But in the meantime, why am I here? An officer goes on to say, well, we know you killed Tony. Killed someone. Could you imagine that? What if I grabbed you right now and said you killed someone? How would you feel? How about you? What would you say? Just think about it. Someone took you to a police station and accused you of killing someone. It was earth-shattering to me. It was ground like, I can't even describe what I felt at that point. But I had to think like, surely they would get it right. Surely this must be some type of mistake. This can't be true. This can't be happening. Not to me. I've never done anything wrong. Nothing. We go on through the process. They come in hour after hour, questioning me. What do you know? Where were you being? I constantly tell them the truth and deny it. I don't know anybody there. I don't know these people. I'm not a part of any gang. Haven't done anything wrong. Surely you must know something, they say. Just tell us something, and you can go home. What would you say to him then? What would you say? The police told you, just tell us something. Just tell us he did it and you could go home. Would you say he did it to go home? Would you? How about you? What would you say? No. No? Great. Because so many people don't say no. I got quite a few friends that I left in prison that truly bought into that. Just tell us what you know and you can go home. It's lies. They'll get up there and lie. Of course, if I tell him exactly what he wants, I can go home. No. But I didn't. I told him the truth. I didn't know anything about anything that happened that day. Never knew anybody. Never knew nothing. I was there having a barbecue that day. Well, you're going to jail, is what one of the officers told me. You'll figure something out when you get there. Wow. I never thought the system would be like that. Surely you want to go to jail if you do something wrong, right? Nobody would just throw an innocent person in jail. Why? Well, that's exactly what happened in my case. I can't tell you why. I can't tell you how I ended up there. All I know is that from that point on, it was nearly 2 years later, I sat in the Cook County Jail. I sat in the Cook County Jail like exactly 2 years before I went to trial. It was court dates back and forth. You would go here, continuous there. You know, we'll go, well, we're going to give you this much information and those type of things. We go through a whole discovery process and all of these other processes, motions and these type of things, all to build up for trial. Okay, cool, is what I thought. Great, I'll finally get my day in court. I could prove I didn't do this. I have all of these witnesses who would say that I was there at this barbecue. I told my attorney about him. Of course he's going to get him, right? Of course, right? Get all of these people who were there. Well, I start trial. I choose to go with a bench trial. I mean, it was fast, it was quicker. It was easy, is what my attorney told me. There's no way a judge will find you guilty. Me, I wasn't much younger than, well, much older than you all. I really hadn't had much, experience with the court system. So wouldn't you take the word of your attorney, the person that you're paying to represent you, the person that's supposed to be on your side? Yeah, that's what I did. I definitely did that. I listened to him. He told me all of this great evidence he had found. How, the white man that she told you about that was standing there, Mr. Arrigo, was going to show up and say I wasn't the man. How he had these other witnesses who also viewed the crime that said it wasn't me. How he'd spoken to all of my alibi witnesses and all of them would show up in court that day. Of course, surely I couldn't go to jail. Surely I couldn't be found guilty. Right? Right? Wrong. That's not what happened. On September the 27th, 2004, my life changed for the worst. That was the day that a judge found me guilty for the murder of Tony Cox. Man, it brings tears to my eyes to this day to even think about it. I couldn't imagine, let alone being accused of killing somebody, but then for somebody to just actually say that you're actually guilty of it. That broke me. And it wasn't just me that it broke. It broke my family, to hear my mother cry, to see her wail up in that courtroom. I mean, You just don't know. Could you imagine your mother or your family hearing that? Could you imagine going through something like that? That was like single-handedly the worst day of my life. Nothing compares to it. I can't tell you how many times and how many nightmares I've had about that day, the way it played over and over and over in my mind. How many times I wish I would have done something different. I mean, I can't tell you how I got there. Well, yes, I could. I could go back and tell you. Remember all those great things I told you that my attorney said he had found? The witness that was going to come say, I didn't do it. The way Arrigo was going to show up. The way he had talked to all of those alibi witnesses and all of them were going to show up. Lies. All lies. When trial came, when it started, I knew something was wrong. Sat and looked at him. I'm not much younger than you all. Of course, I take his word. Of course he's going to do what's right. Of course he's spoken to all of them. I've given them the names, the addresses, the phone numbers. He never even reached out to one of them. He never spoken to the white man that was just standing right there that viewed the crime. Hell, he never even talked to the two witnesses who said they actually seen me do it. I probably could have did better myself. Well, it didn't matter at that point. I came back the next day, the next month, October the 25th, and the judge sentenced me to 60 years. How could I possibly do 60 years? How? That was single-handedly the second worst day of my life. You know? From that point on, I was shipped down to a prison in Joliet, not far from here. Yeah, sat there. You go through this little transition period that they call reception, where they classify you, tell you which institution you would ultimately go to spend the remainder of your sentence. Wow, those days in that room, I can't tell you how many times I cried. So many thoughts went through my mind. My family. I just had a baby. Thoughts of, I can't do this. Maybe I should kill myself. How can I possibly make it through? Any thought imaginable. This is all a nightmare. I'm gonna wake up from this. Nah. That first night hearing that door slam and know you can't walk out for 60 years, man, it took everything out of me. It took everything in me to wake up the next day, to get up the next morning, to eat. It seemed even hard to breathe. Yeah, that was a very, very tough time. But through it all, I found some way to find hope. Surely there's another step to this process, right? Yeah, those great ones that she talked about, that appeal, that right to appeal that you have. I filled out some paperwork in court that last day that said, like, yeah, I'm going to appeal my decision. So maybe the appeal court gets it right. Maybe. Of course, it has to happen. Yeah, well, that didn't really work out so well. That first appeal was denied. Yeah, it was. And for the next 14 years, I vigorously fought to prove my innocence. From there within that prison, law library, I read every book, every case, every brief somebody else's attorney had. If it was there to be read, there to learn from, I definitely tried to learn it. That was my little piece of hope. That's what I got up every day for. That, my family. You know, throughout those 14 years, a lot of things happened. The visits started to dwindle down. So did the phone calls, the money, the support. People began not really so much to lose faith in you, but that is partly what it is. But it seems as though they began to grow used to you not being there. Year after year. Yeah. They're used to you not being there. They've grown accustomed to it. So, you know, things aren't the same way they were day one. So it's a hard process that you go through. You end up hardening your heart in a way. You end up like not really, I don't know even how to describe it. You just don't look forward to things anymore. That visit that they said was going to come doesn't show. That letter that they wrote doesn't arrive. Your days get harder. But one thing that you end up doing is you end up growing used to it. Sad to say. So, with me, I found solace, I found hope in the things that I could do. And the thing that I could do, the thing that I could work on was my case. Who's going to help you better than yourself? No one is what I found. After that experience with attorneys, I somewhat had a lot of doubt, disdain for them. Sorry. So I did the best thing that I could do. Of course, they just read books. I could read them. I could read twice as many. And that's what I did. I worked hard. But it didn't come without failures. The first petition I did in May 2008, I think I sent it in and the judge dismissed it like within, I don't even think mail went out that fast. I got it back so quick. Denied. Wow. I mean, it was hard to take, but what could I expect? It was my first shot, you know? I kept that hope. Cool. I'm gonna appeal this decision. I'm gonna write the next one a little better. That's what I did. Yeah, this one's better, I thought. I gotta go home now. They gotta see all the stuff this attorney did wrong. Cool. I got 10 of the people from the barbecue that day to give me affidavits. Denied. Wow. Hope somewhat seemed to fade a little bit at that point. But I still got a few more chances. I got better over that time. Because on average, the average appeal takes at least 3 years. At least 3. So just think how much better I could get in 3 years. Most attorneys only go to law school for 3 years. So for those 3 years, I studied vigorously. I studied as hard as I could. I kind of like would go to the law library. We only got 1 hour per week, but I used the hell out of that hour. I would distance myself from my friends. That point that we walked into that law library, we weren't friends. It was time for me to get there and learn everything that I could. And that's what I did. I set myself a quota of 8 books per hour. Well, we only got 1 hour, so I had to get through 8 books, 8 cases. Some of them long, some of them short, some of them good, some of them bad. But I had to get through those 8. On lockdowns, nothing happened. So you will have to make use and make do of everything that you had. Me, I found a way. Instead of asking my family to send me money, I would just ask them, could you purchase me a used book? $6. I found a way to order them myself. I would borrow, get copies, everything. Learning there, though, is extremely hard because the law library is sparse. They give you just the bare minimum, just what they do to keep you from suing them. I mean, so, and even then, some guys would tear a case out of a book, which means that the next person behind them couldn't read it. So you would have to find a way to get it. I don't know how I made it, truthfully. I sit here today and just think about it like, it's amazing, it's a miracle. I guess I was blessed. But that second appeal, that one there, it was great if you ask me. Denied, that's what the court said. The same judge, once again. Nah, forget your 10 witnesses. Forget the white man standing there. Forget the other people that said you didn't do it. Those 7 seconds would define my life forever, is what I thought. Those 7 seconds. But I still had other options. There's another appeal. I mean, although less than 1% of those appeals, actually it's even less than 1%, it's 1% of 1% of those appeals. So if you take a penny and you slice it in 100 different sections, those are how many of those habeas corpus are granted. And given that it's thousands come every year, what's the chances of me getting it? I would tell you that I had hope. The fact of the matter, it was just that I was too dumb to give up. Simply. I just had to do it. That's what kept me going. That's exactly what kept me going. That's what kept me going. Every single solitary day. It wasn't a day that went by that I did not work on my case, or maybe somebody else's. Because, you know, you got to get good by practicing. Don't tell them I said that, though. But, like, yeah, I got good. Not that good, but I got okay, let me say that. And then 2011, I worked and I filed my federal habeas corpus. I had to ask the judge to hold on for a second because, like, going to the federal habeas corpus, as she told you, just how hard it is. I mean, they give you so many obstacles to get there. You have to be sure that you've done everything correctly prior. If you missed a date, a deadline, like she told you about that year, well, what she doesn't tell you about that year is that you have to subtract the months that you spent in between all of your other appeals out of that year. And let's say you got shoddy math, or you forgot that you didn't file this that day, they will deny you. Not only that, but you got to be sure that you presented every claim to every other person possible. Every person possible. So that means you got to go to that court, that judge, his friend, his cousin, whoever you could present it to, you have to present it to them. Or else they would say, hey, you didn't give everybody a chance to deny you. So I made sure I did all of that. Dotted those I's, crossed those T's. Made sure I got it in the right amount of time. But still, it's a long shot. It's a long shot. It's paramount to playing a lottery. And I ain't talking about the pick 3 or the pick 4. I'm talking about the big lotto or something like that, the Mega Millions. Like literally. So I took a chance, I put it in, told him to hold on, waited 3 years, as everything else, all of those other people said, no, goodbye, denied, sorry, so long, see you, sucker. Those type of things. And then 3 years later, I finally said, come on, Judge, let's look at this great petition that I put together. He said, okay, cool, great. I think it was all of like 27 days before he denied it. I got the letter in the mail and like, wow. Wow. I didn't know what to do at that point. But you know what? It was one little thing that you could do. And it's like unheard of for somebody like me. Yeah. It's actually unheard of for somebody like me to ultimately get this type of thing granted. Like, it's attorneys that have been practicing 20 or 30 years that didn't get that. So surely I'm not going to win. But I'm too dumb to give up, too stupid to quit. I ain't got nothing but time on my hands. Now, remember I told y'all to slice that penny in 100 sections and then take out that little piece? Well, let's take that little piece and let's slice that piece up 100 more times. Wow. That's exactly how many of them actually get granted. Yeah. All the time, at that point, I had been in jail for, prison, for about almost 15 years at that point. I had went through hell. Not being a part of a gang, not willing to join the gang. Not being scared, not gonna shut up. What you say to me? Stupid. Went through a lot. A stabbing, jumped on, beat, broke nose, fractured wrist, chipped tooth, black eyes, busted nose, you name it. But hey, that's just a part. That's just a part of it. That's the belly of the beast. But hey, it was life. It was the hardest time man, I can't tell you. But it was. So hope had dwindled down in a way. But hey, I still had this one last shot. I could try it. It's funny because this is the court like right under the United States Supreme Court. It's the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. And like, we got a few of them. It's like one for each district. And like, so, like, what's the chances of them hearing me? I had seen people like literally mail off their certificate of appealability Monday and get it denied by Thursday. It's like, nah. Well, hey, I'm too stupid to quit. I couldn't quit. Why not? This time, I wrote the best petition I had ever wrote. At that point, I had 15 years of practice. 5 times longer than most law schools. And I sent it off. It was funny, we had this man, preacher man there, right? And preacher man came, and he was like, what you about to do? I was in the cell. I hadn't went out to yard for a couple of times because I was just trying to perfect this. I was just trying to get it right. And he was like, man, I'm gonna pray on that. Send it down to my cell before you put it in the mail. Me being stupid, I did it. Yeah, I did it. Why not? What could it hurt? You know what I'm saying? I did everything else. Read every book, wrote everything, tried writing everybody for help. I even wrote the Center on Wrongful Convictions before and was denied. So I mailed this thing off, right? And as I told you all before, right, I had seen people get theirs back in like 2 days. Like, come on, fool. What you talking about? You know? So I mailed mine off, and I waited. And I waited. It didn't come back that first week, so I was like, yes. But the mail at the jail is extremely slow, so it could be in the mail. You know? I just ain't got it yet. But that was that little piece of hope. I just held on to it. So I didn't get it back the second week. So normally what happens is if you're expecting something from the court and you don't get it, you should call. You should find a way, write them again or something, because the jail mail is extremely, extremely slow. There's been times where I didn't get things for months, had missed deadlines, did all type of things to where you had to ultimately file and fight again. So I took a chance. I called the clerk. And the funny thing about the clerk is they don't really like being called. So they answer the phone like, what's up, what? You know? And like, it really threw me for a second because like, this supposed to be like a place of business or something. Like, you gonna answer the phone like that? Like, for real? She was like, name, case number. I gave her my name and my case number. And before I could even say what I wanted, she said, still pending, and hung up. I mean, y'all think it's bad. Me, I was just happy it was still pending, you know what I'm saying? Like, hey, it was like music to my ears. I never been hung up and felt so good about it in my life. So, I mean, that was a great sign. I told preacher, man, you did good, you know? So, 1 month rolled by, I called. The second month came and went. I called. This time, somebody a little nicer answered the phone. She didn't say what, she just said name and number. So I gave her the name and the case number. And she said it's still pending. I'm like, are you sure? 2 months? Surely these things don't take that long. They don't take that long to deny you. I asked her, what, are y'all backed up? She was like, nah, you know. And so I was like, okay. I hung up on her before she gave me some bad news. So month 3 rolled and went, called again. And finally they got somebody even nicer that time. And she told me that we would call you when the judge made his decision. Yeah, whatever. I didn't believe her. So month 4 goes, calls again, nothing. Month 5 goes. At the end of month 5, I get this letter. It just comes in the regular mail. It's just one piece of paper. Wow. They must have denied it, I thought. I open it up. And the first thing I see is this from the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, Judge Ann Claire Williams. It's funny because I had actually read cases with her, and she's a great, great justice. I cited some of the stuff she wrote. But as I read further, it said, certificate of appealability granted. That was like a drowning man finally getting a breath of air. To get that to happen to me, like I said, I felt like I won the lottery 3 times over. I don't know how to truly tell you how I felt, but being in prison, you always have this, I don't know, skepticism is the word I'll use for it. You're always skeptical that the ball is gonna drop. Maybe another letter will come in the mail 2 days later saying, we made a mistake or something. And then it went from skepticism when it didn't come to, all right, well, they didn't say you get to go home. All they said was that we're going to grant you another hearing. So when they granted me that hearing, it was the greatest joy of my life, just to have it. They appointed me this attorney named David Crone and Ann Riedel. And now they came to the prison to see me that day. And I can't even describe it. Like, they looked like they was like high schoolers. I was like, no, I can't do this again. I grilled those people, and it seemed as though they knew what they were talking about. Well, somewhat. I wasn't going like I went the first time. When I tell you I stayed on their ass, that is an understatement. Like, for real, like everything. I worked twice as hard, but 3 times as hard as they did. And they kind of got tired of me. I know they did, but I sent them cases and wrote them. And when they came to see me, I asked them, did you read this case? Do you know about that one? Do you know about this one? Eventually, they was like, yeah, we got you. My life was in their hands at that point. I didn't know what to do, what to say, how to act. I just waited. We had a hearing, and everything happened, and it went. Waited. I was ultimately granted a new trial. Well, I was ultimately granted another hearing. So I had a hearing to get another hearing to get another hearing. And they granted it. And when they granted it, Mr. Crone was so tired of me that he called her. He was like, hey, come take this case. And when they came to take the case, the first question I asked her was like, hey, I wrote y'all before. Y'all turned me down. Why you here now? But that was like the greatest moment of my life. Meeting that angel there and getting the chance to work with her was like single-handedly like the best thing that has ever happened in my life. Like next to my kids, like, yeah, like truly. I gotta tell you, I appreciate you and thank you. Let me do that. From that point, we started working. And she'll tell you, I gave her hell too. I was on her. I found every witness from prison. I didn't know we had that many resources, but I got phone numbers, addresses, called, tried to do everything I could. I was not going like before. I made sure these people knew the court dates. And I trusted her. She gained it, she earned it, she was worthy. And she worked. And she helped me, and I gave them hell too. I definitely did. Did you read this case? Do you know about this? And we had a hearing in May of 2017 before the same judge that had told me, denied. And I got on the stand after all this time, all that thinking. They say I did great. To me, I think I did terribly. See, she said I did great again. I think I did bad. I mean, and it's just because at that point, everything that you've thought about for all of those years and everything floods you while you're up there. I couldn't think straight, couldn't see straight. I was nervous. I can't explain it to you all what you go through up there, because this is the single most thing that you worked for your entire life. A couple of days, it was over. Back to the prison to wait. That I did. 6 long, agonizing months. She would call or tell me to call her. I'll call every month, once a month, once here or there, speak for 5 minutes just to see how it's going. She hated that because I get off the phone so fast. But like I would just call. I wouldn't try to be a bother or worrisome. I think I had drove him crazy enough. On February the 7th, the judge wrote a decision It was 23 pages, 2,361 words. And like, it gave me my life back. Yeah, that's what it did. It gave me my life back. I read that decision, well, let me say, I read that decision at least once or twice a month. I read it to remember, not that I'm gonna ever forget, but I read it so that I would never, ever take for granted anything. I read it so that I see just, it was something like that I achieved. I never really achieved nothing. I spent most of my life in prison. That's like a great achievement to me. On March the 26th of 2018, I went back before the circuit court. And back before the very judge that had sentenced me 60 years ago. You should have seen the look on his face. It's funny. And wow, it was surreal to say the least. But yeah. He talked like we was long lost friends. I couldn't believe it. Like, great to see you again. No, it's not. No, it is not. But I was happy to be there. He could have said whatever he wanted to say. That day he gave me a bond. And on May the 3rd of 2018, I was able to reach it, and I walked out of prison for the first time in like 16 years. Those first days, first moments were so real, I can't even imagine how I felt. I had dreams like that, we all do, and you wake up, and you still be in the cell. Like, damn. But this dream has been going on now for 15 months. I hope I never wake up from it. January the 16th, 2019, the Cook County State's Attorney decided to drop all charges. I had dreamed about that moment for so long. It played out so many different ways. But when it finally came, it was like so anticlimactic. It was just like, hey, you can go. No parade, no balloons, no cheers, no applause, no nothing. But to me, that day meant everything. Because it was no longer a chance for me to go back into that hell that I had survived all of those years. I'm so grateful and appreciative to just be standing here right now. You don't know. Thank you so much. And in closing out, I just would say, throughout that whole ordeal, it was like just hope and perseverance that kept me going. I stand here still. I have dreams. I still work hard towards trying to achieve. And I'm gonna be that lawyer one day. The thing that I said, just like her, great. Probably won't be as great, but I'm most definitely gonna try. And I read this quote one time that said, necessity breeds invention. I don't know who said it or whatever, but it really meant a lot. Because in my situation, necessity bred passion. I ended up having a passion for the law, for doing this type of work that goes with me to this day. There isn't a day that goes by that I do not work on some piece of law or legislation, a case. I get 50 phone calls a day from them guys in jail. I work, well, when I first came home, I worked at a place called Lundale Christian Legal Center that worked with impoverished youth. Funny thing is how ironic it is. It's right up the street from the place that I was that day and in the very neighborhood where Mr. Cox was killed. I rode past that spot every day. And I thought about how much the incident that occurred right there changed my life. I don't know what to tell you all anymore. That's just my story. It's just my piece of it. And thank you for listening. Go ahead.
Has anyone from the initial trial reached out and apologized, maybe the judge or the initial lawyer?
No. Simply no. That's not something that typically happens. The new judge, he ultimately said some words because the trial judge that I hear from the first time ultimately retired during this whole process. And the new judge that I end up getting, he ultimately, gave me some well wishes and some great words of encouragement, and I thank him for that. But nobody from the initial trial did it, and it's understandable. It's no problem. No hard feelings or anything like that.
I'm Pastor Shannon. I pastor a church right down the street. I met you outside.
Yes, sir.
2 questions. Were you compensated for the 16 years that you stayed in prison?
Well, that's still an ongoing process. I only been home 15 months. That type of process could take years. So really, no, at this point.
Well, let me ask another question. Visiting a lot of young men in prison like you, usually if there's a gunshot and a person is killed, they get 45 years. Why were you given 60?
Well, first off, I need to break down the law for you. First of all, you have a crime that's committed. The crime gives you one time, meaning if you have a murder carries 20 to 60 years in Illinois at 100% of the time. Or if you shot someone, that could be an attempt murder, could carry 6 to 30, or with other enhancements, it could ultimately go higher. They have another part of it, which is always attached to any crime that happened with the firearm, which is called the firearm enhancement, where you are given 15 years, 20 years, or 25 to life if somebody is killed or greatly harmed or receives great bodily harm. So when you compile those two together, it seems as though with any crime, you're facing at least 35 to maybe 85, 90 or more years. So it's not a guarantee, and when I say that amount of time, It's not a guarantee of which one you get. It's the judge's discretion on which sentence he chooses to impose, and in my instance, he chose to impose 40 years for the murder and 20 years for the firearm enhancement, which together end up being 60 years.
Oh, okay. I got you.
I'm with the college newspaper, and my question is when you were announced to be a free man, what was the first thing that you did? Like, activity thing that you did that you were like, I've missed this for so long?
The first thing I did was we actually went to a cafeteria of all places. We just went and sat down and ate. And I mean, it's so many things that you would think that you would want to do, but for the most part, when you finally get to that point, you just be happy and you just take a breath, and you just take a sigh and just release. Just imagine just fighting for 18 years. When you finally get through, or 16 years, when you finally get through, you're tired. You just want to rest.
Thank you.
Hi, I have two questions. My first question is, back when you were arrested, you may not know, why did they name you and come looking for you that day? Like, did you just happen to fit a description of what? And then my second question is, did they ever find out who killed Tony Cox?
Okay. All right. Well, to first answer your question, to this day, we don't know why me. Besides what she said earlier about there being some, crosses between the Erics, there's nothing there. There's nothing within police reports, no police officer, no witness could tell you why me. Out of the hundreds of thousands of photos, I can't tell you why mine ended up in that 6. Nor can any police or anyone tell you why me. And your second question was about, what was the second
Did
question?
they ever get who really shot Tony?
Well, funny thing is that in the Eric part, even the Seventh Circuit opinion ultimately states who police reports said did it. Nobody's currently incarcerated or locked up or been tried and convicted for it, but me, and I've been exonerated. So to this day, Tony Cox's murder is still considered open for the most part.
Hi, a couple things. So it said, from what I've read, you got picked out of a lineup. Who picked you out of a lineup? And also, what was the evidence held against you in trial? If you were not there, if you were not the person that did it, what was their case against you to get you that guilty verdict?
Okay. Well, the answer is simple. Those same 2 witnesses, the ones I told you, the one that said she seen the person for 5 seconds, the other one that says she seen the person for maybe 2 seconds, 3 seconds, though that was the only evidence. The 2 witnesses that she spoke about earlier that were driving in separate cars, going separate ways down the street, there was nothing else. No statement, no weapon, no motive, nothing linking myself and the deceased, nothing. Nothing at all.
That's all the prosecution had in the case?
Yes, that's all.
Saw you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's true, even when you have an alibi.
Yes, ma'am.
They didn't even look in the background of the person that pointed you out as the shooter? No?
No, ma'am. I served 16 years in prison, so.
That was horrible.
Yeah, it was.
Wow, sorry about that.
Yeah, no need to be. That's great.
My question was kind of the same as hers. Can I not use this? No. Like, it makes me awkward. I have to use it? Okay. But it was like the same question that she had as far as like if that was the only evidence that they ran with, and I think that's horrible. Yeah. So how long was like the time you were in that court when they made that decision that they were going to go with just that piece of evidence? Like, was it a short trial? Like 7 seconds? Yeah, your 7 seconds that the judge said yeah, you're guilty, but I'm saying, like, how long was that whole,
The
like,
trial process, hold on. I went through so many different courts. Could you tell which one, like, how long was it from the day I was arrested to the day I was found guilty?
the initial one, like the
maybe your
first one
trial.
that you
Oh,
like, showed up
my
to?
trial was about, well, it was a bench trial, which means that the judge will take you after, like he'll do his regular call, then you'll come in afterwards, which means that we did a few hours each day for like a week. We did like maybe 2 to 3 hours each day for like a week.
Okay.
So, and like, yeah, actually it was 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours each day, Monday through Thursday. Friday we had off. So
Yeah.
that's what it was.
So it like took a whole week to make your final decision, kind of?
It took, what you mean, for the judge to make his final decision? No, not as long, no, not long at all. He made his decision like probably like the following, well, the following Monday he made the decision as to why he was sentencing me,
Okay.
why he found me guilty and those type of things. Go ahead, you can ask another question.
Got some people in the back, too.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I missed the first part of this conference, so I didn't understand to begin with when you were first brought into court that you had a public defender.
No, sir. I had a private attorney that I paid.
Pardon me?
I had a private attorney, sir.
I can't understand. Number one, my assessment would be no probable cause could have been proven immediately. You had no probable cause to even bring this thing forward. You've been just thrown out altogether. What was this lawyer doing? Sleeping?
He should have been.
I'm terribly sorry. I don't mean to make a joke. Your accomplishments are great. Welcome to freedom. I want to be one of the first people to say, wow, wow, wow. And I had to be here for that. It was fabulous. And I'm glad that you are now a paralegal and can work for us, because I have some other questions for you later in law out here that are new developments that have not been instigated by any of these law enforcement. They are, in my opinion, what they are.
Yes,
And therefore, people like you end up caught between the cracks and taken all that time. No one can ever repay you for all those years of your life taken away from you. No one.
Thank you.
No amount of money that would ever bring back that time to you, and that is just so horrific for the world and the rest of us in this country, knowing that we have more incarcerated people in America than any other country in the world is a black mark on the United States of America. And it's got to come to a screeching halt, and there you are, there I'm going to be doing the same thing. It's all got to be reversed. It's just incredibly ridiculous. All those denials and innuendos and just pointing a finger at you of thousands of people just remain mind-boggling that it could happen to any one of us
Yes,
at
sir.
any time, or you could be singled out particularly because somebody had their nose out of joint. They didn't like what you were doing in that town or something.
Yes, sir.
Now, these witnesses, 2 or 3 seconds, how could that even be allowed as any kind of, 16 years ago, we're talking about federal court, right? You started out in the appellate, then you went on to the federal court,
Yeah.
the Dirksen building.
Yes, sir.
And where were you housed in all this time at the penitentiary, Stateville?
Yes.
No. Unbelievable. Now, at least you could you go outside there? I'm just asking
I
because
wouldn't
you
call
can't
it
hear
outside.
you can't hear in DuPage County go outside at all. You have no contact with the outside air for the duration of your case. Nothing.
Well, they have outside, but it's inside of the wall, so.
Right,
really,
right.
like,
But at least
yeah,
you could
yeah,
get
yeah,
out in the open air is my point.
Yeah, yeah. for
But
the
not
most
that it
part.
exonerated anything, mind you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Did you have any prior convictions or anything that attributed to you being pointed out, to you getting guilty without that prosecution defending their case? What was added on top of you? Why did they choose you? Why did they automatically assume guilty? Did you have prior convictions? Did you
At that point, no, ma'am. No. Nah. At that point, no, ma'am.
No, but that's another reason why that's just wrong. You had no clean record. You weren't there at the scene. Obviously you weren't attached to it. You didn't do anything. But then I'm just curious why the prosecution brought it down on you.
I don't know.
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
My
Not
question.
at that point, ma'am.
Oh, my question here. Are you planning to write a book? You really need to, because I'm a grandmother, and I came here to hear your presentation because I wanted to take something back to my Black grandchildren. And you have given me a lot of food for thought. I'm hoping that you can put it on paper so that I can have them read what wrongful conviction can be, because they're 12 years old and I'm trying to tell them you're vulnerable. And you can, that's my first comment. The second comment is, where are you going from here? What have you taught your children as a result of your experience?
Well, it hasn't been one single thing that I taught my children as a result of my experience. My children also went through this experience with me, so we all learned together about what was going on. They sat front row and seen a lot of what ultimately happened. So like, we still have talks about it. They're very much aware of the system, of what's going on and those type of things. I mean, they're great. Like, literally, they're great. I can't even start to brag about them as much. I mean, they're all extremely great. They're all extremely great. I just had one just graduate from college the other day, so like, yeah. So they're doing great, and they know exactly what's going on and what happened. So it's like no one thing that I could teach them. It's been a learning process. They've went through this just as long as I have.
Okay. Did your initial lawyer tell you why he wanted to do a bench trial over a jury trial?
Yeah, it was stuff that were lies, but he basically just said like things such as it was easier, he could put in more law, he could put in more law compared to what he could do with the jury. He said things of that nature, basically that he had the witnesses, though no judge would convict me, though just those type of things that I ultimately end up learning weren't true, basically, for lack of a better word. So like, yeah, he basically lied, like, yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Considering the clearance rate for murder in Cook County is roughly like 13%, this is a question for either of you.
Pardon me, I couldn't understand you, sorry.
Oh, no problem. This is a question for either of you. Considering the clearance rate for murders in Cook County is roughly 13%, what could you put a number to how many of those people are wrongfully convicted? Do you think it's possible to do that?
Oh, can I put a number to them? Well, I'll just say this. Cook County, well, Chicago leads the nation for wrongful convictions. That's just all that I have to tell you. So to say, I can't tell you how many are wrongfully convicted someplace else, but I could literally take you through and show you some cases where you'll be like, I can't believe this person is sitting in prison. Like, literally. So I would just say that Cook County and Chicago leads the nation in wrongful convictions. And I mean, these are the people who were ultimately released. So like, to give you a number, I couldn't truly give you a number, but I think we're roughly somewhere close to 200 in the last couple of years, few years. Well, I think we've reached close to 200 here in Chicago within the last, since this number has been, you know, since, well, it's not just murders, just wrongful convictions in general. Most of them turn out to be murders because most people don't sit in prison long enough to ultimately go through the whole process to ultimately get acquitted. You have some people who have other serious crimes that do it, such as rapes or things of that nature, or attempted murders or those type of things. But majority of them are murders, being just the amount of time that it takes to go through that process that I told you about. Me being on the end of 16 is like one of the lower processes. There are a few guys that I know that got out in under 16 years, but on average, it's somewhere around 15 to 20 years, and then you have some people who do considerably more. So for the most part, they are murders, and for the most part, it is around this amount of time. So.
If you happen to still play chess, there's a really great chess table on Michigan Avenue in Jackson. I'm sure a lot of people would love to talk to you there.
Yeah.
Nice.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I have a question. So I know a couple people who have been charged and released from prison. So do you have a background? Like, do you have any felony on your background at this moment, or all charges were dropped and you're clear and you can go and get a job and move forward?
In regards to this case right here?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, it's a process called the Certificate of Innocence process. At this point, it's kind of crazy the way that it actually shows up. It doesn't really show up as a conviction or anything, but it's still like an arrest. It is something that still probably is viewed or those type of things. And even when you go through the Certificate of Innocence process, which ultimately has this, is a section in there that ultimately has, if I'm granted a Certificate of Innocence, I can have this expunged from my record. But yet and still, everything is just a click away. So even, yeah, I'm working towards that. But even after doing that, you could just Google my name and it still comes up. Like I'm not saying it like that because, you know, everything is not one database. So, you know, it was in the newspapers, me getting out was in the newspapers and those type of things. So whenever you Google my name, something would ultimately, I mean, it's no way that I'll get rid of everything. But it's great to at least be able to say I'm not a convicted murderer, though, at the end of the day. So happy about that.
Hi, I just wanted to first off start by saying that I am so sorry that you were wrongfully convicted. I am studying to be a law enforcement officer, and my goal with that is to prevent injustices occurring in the criminal justice system. And so I just want to know from you what you think police officers and the criminal justice system as a whole can do to combat these sort of injustices and prevent them from happening.
Wow. Wow. I don't know how much time. No, I'm just no, but I would say the single most thing is to treat people like people. I think that if you really start to think about people like people instead of bad guys or convicts or culprits or those type of things, I think that it will go a long way towards changing the way that they would ultimately act or treat somebody or handle a case. At the end of the day, I think that if you just treat people like people in the way that you would want to be treated, and I think that will go a long way, just in itself. I think that in itself will just go a long way, because I don't think somebody could have done that to somebody that they feel was nice or they're equal or whatever. I don't think that they would have treated, you know what I'm saying? So really, I just think that if you go into it treating people as people, I think that will go a long way towards changing just the whole system.
Were you able to meet up with the witnesses that went against you?
Wow. No. No. And I say this, it later came out that they were ultimately, in a way, one of them said the police ultimately, forced her into identifying me, or, basically nudged her into saying that I was the person that done it. And I thank her, and she was willing to come forward and say all of that and do all of that. And I am extremely, extremely grateful to her for that. And maybe one day we will get to that point, but at this point,
After all the litigation is over.
yeah, it's a whole bunch of more stuff that needs to go on and happen before that would be okay for me to do. So maybe one day I would definitely love to thank her for just coming forward and saying what she did say. The other lady, she said a few things that were great, and who knows, at this point.
Girl straight.
Yeah, I guess.
Sorry though, that stinks. Because there's a case that we were just learning in one of my classes about in my criminal law class. It was about the 9 boys back in 1932. It was Powell versus Alabama. Did you ever read that one? I'm sure you know it. Where they weren't able, they didn't even get to meet their witnesses, or obviously didn't have any counsel or anything. So does that affect? I mean, that obviously has to affect the court system in many ways, right? The fact that you don't even get the right to confront them, or
I mean, it's the Sixth Amendment. That case deals somewhat with the Sixth Amendment right to confront and those type of things. So.
Yeah, they came in court and testified, although one was wearing a disguise.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's different than meeting and having a conversation with the person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Central Park 5, your case reminds me a little bit. Not exactly, but they were wrongfully accused.
Yeah.
This is just a general question, just for clarification. How old were you when you were convicted? I just want it, just so I have the exact,
I was
or exact as you.
Go ahead.
That's it. I just was wondering.
I was 23 years old when I was
23
convicted.
years old. Thank you very much.
When I was convicted, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm here with the racial and ethnic relations class. So I was wondering, what role do you think your race played in your conviction?
Wow. I was asked this immediately after all of the charges were dropped. And I don't know if it was the single most factor. I definitely won't say that that's it. But I think that me being a young black person from, impoverished neighborhood definitely played a big role in what happened to me. If I was maybe another color from another place, I don't know if the same dynamic would have played out the way that it did. But I won't say it's the single most factor, but I think that does have a big play on what ultimately happened. Yes, ma'am.
I have 2 questions. First of all, what is the name of the judge that found you guilty?
Judge William G. Lacey, and the G stands for Gregory.
And then my second question is, the attorney that represented you, do we know, is he still practicing?
Well, funny thing, very funny, very, very ironic. On the day that I was ultimately acquitted, all charges were dropped, the day that you seen the picture, as we were leaving, he actually walked past us, so he's still practicing. Sometime later, he actually walked past us going to go to court. So, pardon me? I don't know. Huh? Most definitely not. I mean, it's no point, no reason. I wouldn't even give him the time of day. He isn't even worth it at this point, Huh?
He didn't do that for you.
Yeah. I mean, we have an old saying in prison that, how could you be mad at somebody that's not even thinking about you? So, I wouldn't even waste the power or the time to be mad, you sitting in there mad or focusing more on him. I'm sure that he hasn't thought 2 seconds about me since whatever happened whatever happens. So at the end of the day, I just got to work towards being a better me and work towards my life and get my stuff together and not focus on him or the like. Yeah, go ahead, man.
First, I think you're a hero, first of all, for everything you've done.
I won't go that far now.
Like you said, you didn't sit there and just let life go and not do anything about it.
Yeah.
And I think it's so motive for everything and everyone, no matter the skin color or anything. And also, do you think if the victim's skin color would have been different, you wouldn't have been in the lineup? If it would have been a Caucasian guy, do you think you would have been in the lineup or end up in the lineup?
That I don't know. I really don't know. If the victims was a different race, I'm not sure. I don't know. To me, I try not to think of it in a color situation or a racial situation. I try not to. I know that it had some factor in everything that happened, but I try not to. I really didn't think about it. I never thought about that dynamic of it. But who knows? Who absolutely knows? And I don't think of myself as a hero. I was just too stupid to quit, I guess. Yes, ma'am.
Following up on Christine's question about the judge, wasn't the judge that exonerated you Judge Guzman?
No, Judge Guzman.
Yeah, in the federal court. Yeah.
Well, Judge Guzman in the federal court ultimately granted me a new trial. He wasn't the one that ultimately exonerated me.
I believe he came to our paralegal club a few years ago, and his wife was a counselor here for a number of years. So I thought that was sort of a small world looping back.
Or Judge Ronald. Oh no, he's a great judge. I would definitely tell him that now. But when he denied me the first time, he was the biggest piece of. Nah, but like yeah, going into his courtroom, I think he really took a time to ultimately sit down and analyze the case. He wrote a scathing opinion of. Basically of the trial counsel, and like I think he really gave it, a great consideration. Let me say that he just gave great consideration of the case, and I really think he got it and he understood it and he seen it. But
I'll go a little further than that. He's known as a tough judge. He's known as a law and order judge. He heard Eric testify. You all heard him. In his opinion, I was shocked to see this, that he specifically found Eric credible and believable. He spent a lot of time talking about the defense attorney who came in and testified and basically said he found him not credible, that not only was he a bad lawyer, but that he came into court and said things that weren't true. And he found all of Eric's alibi witnesses believable. And he had to write an opinion that was the opposite of what he said the first time. And he didn't seem to do it unwillingly. It was a full-bodied, decisive, one of the most decisive opinions from a federal judge in a habeas case I've ever seen. And so that said something about his character, especially given that he had been told, you got to do it over again.
Mm-hmm. 2,361 words. Yep.
We really are so humbled, I think would be the word. From the beginning, first I guess I should say, I'm Taya Force, Criminal Justice Constitution Committee Chair. And this has been single-handedly, I think, one of the best days of my life because I was able to see the joy and clearly the pain that this man went through. And yet he was so transparent and he shared that with us. So before you leave, I would like for you to just join me. And I don't even think a hand clap would be enough, but if you could just stand with me and let him know. Yeah, and clap. Thank you.
Thank y'all, I appreciate it. Thank you.
And because he's been so transparent, you can have a seat. One of the things that he's allowed us to do, and Professor Daniel, is kind of hang out with us today. So he will be at 2 p.m. at Professor
2 o'clock in my Introduction to Sociology class for a little bit in BIC 2501, and 3 to 4:15 in the Student Life Lounge on the first floor of the BIC for a very informal sort of Q&A. People got questions, some light refreshments will be there.
And the Paralegal Club and Academy of Law and Justice, at the Paralegal Club and Academy of Law and Justice from 4:45 to 5:45. So many opportunities to re-engage with Eric and Karen.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for just letting him know that not only is he human, but he's humanly here and it's humanly possible. So for everyone who wants to get involved in this work, this is what you don't want to do. I have some words. Don't do this. Treat people like people. Treat people regardless of what your bias, your prejudice, whatever you come to the table with, and we all do. Don't allow that to impact your work. Have a great day.